Hello everybody, how are you all doing? After a day of, I had a day off, and we are now back with the Escape from Furnace read through with Solitary. We are on to book 2. For those of you who don't know, who haven't been following, for the last couple of weeks or so, we have been reading through Escape from Furnace Lockdown as a way of alleviating the boredom of lockdown. We are now into, well, here in the UK, we're now into the fifth week of lockdown. I can't remember. It's been so long. And yeah, it does get very tedious. And I know a lot of you are off school and a lot of you are probably very bored. And I thought this might be a nice way of just spending like half an hour a day. I hope you've been enjoying it. Those of you who have been following the story so far. For those of you who are just joining us, hello. We are, and if you are planning to go back to the beginning, then stop watching now and go to part 1. But for those of you who want a recap, since we had a day off yesterday, and I know a day is a long time, Alex Sawyer was accused of murdering his best friend Toby, and he was sent to Furnace Penitentiary. Furnace Penitentiary is the world's worst prison for young offenders. It's buried a mile beneath the ground, entombed in rock and concrete. Once you're there until you die. And it really doesn't take very long, because Furnace Penitentiary is full of gangs that will shank you if you offend them in any way. It's full of guards that will just shoot you if you break any of the rules. It's full of a twisted warden who nobody really understands. You can't look him in the eye. It's full of these skinless mutant dogs that will chew you to pieces. It's full of monsters that come out at night. It's full of these things here. Oh, I forgot to give Floyd a hat today. I'm sorry, Floyd. I wonder why he looks so annoyed. Annoyed Floyd. Yeah, so Weezers. Nobody knows what Weezers are, but they come out at night and they stalk around the prison during something called the Blood Watch. And if they mark your cell, you've had it, you get taken out of your cell into the tunnels beneath Furnace, and no one really knows what happens to you down there. So, Alex Sawyer was put inside Furnace Penitentiary, and he made a few friends. Most importantly, Donovan and Z, and later on a new kid called Toby. He made a few enemies, including Kevin and the Skulls, and then later on Gary Owens, who took control of the Skulls, and who is a really nasty piece of work, but who ended up relying on Alex, because Alex found a way out of Furnace, and nobody has ever done it before. Alex discovered an underground river deep beneath the prison. The only trouble was it was only accessible through a crack that was about this wide. So Alex devised a plan to fill rubber gloves with gas from the kitchens and then smuggle these gloves into the chipping room where the crack was located and stuff them all over the crack. And they had a plan to break out. This plan worked, but there were a few hitches on the night before rather. The Blood Watch happened and Donovan was taken by the Weezers. Poor Donovan. I'm so sorry, Donovan. And he has been taken. So Alex and Z and Toby and Gary all made a break for it the very next day. It went pretty badly wrong. Everybody was injured in an explosion. The guards chased them. The dogs chased them. There was a big fight between black suits. Alex recognised one of the black suits as Monty, one of his friends who'd been taken and twisted and turned into this kind of giant monster. And Alex and Z and Toby's pretty much had it. Toby's just kind of blown to smithereens, but he still wanted to escape. Gary's gone. Gary's already jumped into the river. They managed to blow a hole. They managed to get to the edge of this hole, and the last line of Furnace Lockdown is, and smiling at the thought, I jumped. So what happens next? This is Escape from Furnace Solitary. The first chapter is called Confession, a confession of my own. This confession is actually based on real life, something that happened to me, or rather something that I did when I was younger. And maybe I'll talk a bit more about that later on, but enough of that for now. I'll get through the first few chapters of Solitary, probably only the first 2, but maybe 3. Confession. I have a confession. I'm not a good person. I always said that I only stole from strangers, that I only took stuff they'd never really miss, money and electronics and the sort of things that you can't cry over. But that was a lie. I didn't stop there. I couldn't. I stole from the people I loved and took the things that meant the most to them. I didn't just break into their cupboards and drawers. I broke into their hearts and ripped out whatever I wanted. Anything that would get me some easy money down at the market. So don't go fooling yourself that I'm a good person, that I'm an innocent victim, someone who didn't deserve to be locked up inside the hell on earth known as Furnace Penitentiary. I'm not. Don't get me wrong, I didn't kill my best friend Toby when we broke into that house. No, the black suits did it. They shot him, then they framed me for his murder. But I've done things that are just as bad. I've killed little parts of people. I've cut them up inside, hurt them so much they wished they were dead. There isn't time to confess everything, but I have to get this off my chest. If I don't do it now, then I might never get the chance. Death's coming up fast. I can feel its cold fingers around my throat. 2 years ago, when I was 12, my gran died. She had a fit in the middle of the night and swallowed her tongue. Mum was devastated, like any daughter would be. She cried for weeks. She didn't eat. She hardly spoke to me or Dad. She'd just sit and hold the little silver locket that Gran had left her, gently stroking the scarred and crumpled photos inside. I guess I don't really need to tell you what I did, but I'm going to anyway. I need to. I waited till she was asleep one night, 10 days or so after Gran had been buried. Then I sneaked into her room and pried that locket from her hand. 10 quid. 10 lousy pounds is what I got for it. A handful of dirty coins for the only thing my mum had left of her mum. I watched the man I sold it to rip the photos out from inside and chuck them in the bin. And I didn't feel a shred of remorse. Mum knew I was the one who'd taken it. She'd never said anything, but I could see it in her eyes. There was no warmth there anymore. No love. It was like she looked right through me, at a phantom over my shoulder, at the son she wished she could have, the son she'd lost forever. See what I mean? I'm not a good person. Don't forget that. It'll make my story easier to stomach if you know that I deserve to be punished for Toby's death, even though it wasn't me who pulled the trigger, that I deserve to be sent away for life in Furnace, deep in the rancid guts of the planet, and that I deserved everything that happened to me there. Because Furnace is no ordinary prison. It's a living nightmare, perfectly designed for people like me. A place where freaks in gas masks, wheezers as we called them, stalk the corridors at night and carry boys screaming from their cells. Where those stolen kids are brought back as monsters, all rippling muscles beneath stitched skin. And where the same poor wretches are eventually turned into black suits, the warden's soulless guards. I saw it happen with my own eyes. I saw it happen to Monty. I saw what he'd become right before he died. So never let yourself forget that I'm a bad person. That all us cons are, even the good guys I met inside, like Donovan and Z and Toby. No, not my old friend I'm supposed to have killed, a new friend with the same name. The four of us thought we'd found a way to escape, blowing a hole in the chipping room floor with gas smuggled out of the kitchen. But nobody can run from their own demons. Donovan was taken by the Wheezers the night before we broke, and as for the rest of us, me and Z and my new friend Toby, well, maybe even Furnace was too good for us. It was certainly too good for Gary Owens, the head case who discovered our plan and followed along like a bad smell. No, maybe our fate was to find out what horrors lay in the tunnels beneath the prison. Because that was our way out, the river that runs deep underground below the bowels of Furnace. We didn't know where it led to, we didn't care. Anywhere that wasn't Furnace was good enough for us. Or so we thought. Oh yes, beneath heaven is hell, and beneath hell is Furnace, but the horrors that crawl and feast beneath that, now that's a truly fitting punishment for someone like me. So there you have it, my confession. It may not seem like the best time to share it, but it's funny what races through your head when you're plummeting into the darkness with only razor-sharp rocks and rapids to break your fall. I should just point out that I didn't steal a locket from my mum, but I did steal a few things and sell them down the market. So not quite as bad, but, you know, partly based on truth. Sorry, Mum. The river. And my gran is fine, my mum's mum. She's still alive. The river. Hi, Gran. The river. Falling into that river was like falling into death. The first thing it stole was my breath, knocked from me as I plunged into liquid ice. I felt my lungs shrivel, every last scrap of oxygen forced out. I tried to snatch in another breath, but all I got was cold water, dead fingers forced down my windpipe and filling me with darkness. The current was too strong, grabbing my body and tossing it from rock to rock like a rag doll. I felt pain tear at my left leg, then my head exploded into light and white noise as I was hurled against the jagged stone. I tried to swim, tried to grab the walls of the tunnel, tried to do anything other than be pounded into a bloody mess of flesh by the sheer force of the water. And at first I thought I was succeeding, the pain leaving me and making me feel like I was drifting down a river of silk. Only I knew I was still being torn to shreds, the agony replaced by numbness and the kind of sickening warmth you know is just a trick of the mind to keep you calm while the last few drops of life ebb away. I stopped fighting it, giving myself up to my watery grave. It wasn't fair. Donovan, Z, Toby and I, we'd done everything right. We'd found the crack in the floor in room 2, smuggled in the gas-filled gloves from the kitchen and blown the place to splinters. We should have been free. The river was supposed to have been our own private expressway out of Furnace, carrying us laughing to the surface where we could bathe in starlight and howl at the moon and feel the gentle breath of night on our skin. But instead it was like another of the warden's vicious beasts, a nightmare dog that held us in its foaming jaws and shook us until we were broken. I was going to die down here. I knew it. And suddenly that didn't seem preferable to life in Furnace. Suddenly I wanted to be back in my cell, in the light and the heat, because even the most sadistic guard and the cruelest Skull gang member could be bargained with. The river was a force of unrelenting fury that made even the warden seem human. I felt my body lurch, felt something in the blackness deep inside me snap. I tried again to breathe, my lungs bursting. The roar of the water began to fade as the river took my hearing. I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I wasn't anything, because that was the last little piece of me that the river stole, bleeding my emotions out and leaving me an empty husk, buried in a casket of ice at the bottom of the world. I wanted to open my eyes, but I couldn't. "You're dead," said a voice. Maybe someone else's, maybe my own. "Dead people don't open their eyes." That made sense, but I still wanted to open them, only I couldn't quite remember how. I stared at the darkness, willing something to happen, praying for my vision to work. Very slowly, the black screen in front of me parted, a crack of weak golden light sliding into my brain. It carried no heat, but all the same it began to chase away the chills inside my body. I could feel the numbness recede, and in its place came a deep, pounding agony so profound that I threw up. It was mainly river water, but I could feel something else vomited from me too, something barbed and heavy that had been wrapped around my guts ever since I jumped. I tipped back my head, my entire body gripped by freezing fire, and I tried to focus on the light. I knew what it was, of course. It was the end. It was the afterlife calling me, the thing people see right on the edge of death. I didn't care anymore. It could take me wherever I deserved to go, just so long as it made the pain stop. I tried to hold out my hands, tried to welcome it, and for a moment the light grew brighter, so intense that I felt like I was bathed in gold. Then it snapped off, dropping me back into darkness, into pain. "You're bad," said the voice, my delirious mind, "and bad people don't go to heaven." I tried to scream, but it was too much. The world slipped, shuddered, and fell away. The trembling ground brought me back, pulling me up from the abyss. I didn't even try to open my eyes this time, just clung to the sensation of movement from beneath me, the slightest tremor which let me know I still existed. Although my body throbbed with pain, I could tell that I wasn't lying on the cold stone of the tunnel. Whatever it was soft and gave out a slight warmth which I gripped with the last of my strength. I felt a weight on my shoulders, something pulling me towards it. For a moment my mind snapped and I was lying on my bed at home, Just a kid, snared by fever, my mum hugging me close and refusing to let go even when I tried to squirm away. Then I heard the roar of the river, and it all rushed back like a splash of acid. The explosion, the fight with the black suits, the sound of the mutant dogs as they tried to burrow through the rockfall behind us. Then the leap into the unknown. I fought to bring back the memory of my mum, but it was gone, sucked into the shadows like every other part of me. I put my head against the soft ground, trying to burrow into the heat, trying to hide from the fear and the pain. But they found me, and once again I was pulled into oblivion. Voices this time, hammered through my subconscious so hard that I could feel them as much as hear them. Got to move! I'm not leaving him! Slit the little man, we're all going to die because of him. Can't go, you've got the only light, you can't. Gut him good, better move or you'll get it too. Drifting out, a black cloud settling over my mind again. I panicked, something was happening. I needed to be awake. I fought against the agony, against the part of me that just wanted to fade away into nothing. The ground was moving, something holding me tight, thin arms around my shoulders. Gary, back off, he can still get us out of here, just give him another minute. With each word, the shape beneath me vibrated. More memories came flooding back. 2 friends jumping by my side, and a third, Gary Owens. The psychopath who'd taken over the skulls, who'd already stolen God knows how many lives in cold blood. The thought of him pumped more adrenaline into me than the river had done, and this time I managed to open my eyes. The light was still there, timid and more silver than gold. It beamed out from a shadow beneath it, a black form against the grey walls that was moving my way. I blinked, seeing the red veins of my own retinas splashed across the darkness. The shadow focused, took shape, a muscular body with a dead face that sneered at me. Just in time, little man, said Gary, spitting a wad of bloody phlegm onto the rock. I noticed that his face was cut up pretty bad, and a steady stream of crimson droplets fell from his left sleeve. You messed up. You got us all killed. Alex, said a voice from right behind me, making the ground tremble again. I looked up, feeling as though somebody was pulling the tendons from my neck with a pair of red-hot tongs. Z was sitting next to me, cradling me, his body still shivering. I tried to get up, but for a second he wouldn't let me. His arms locked tight. I placed a hand on his, squeezing as hard as my sprained fingers would allow, and he finally surrendered. Oh, Jesus, I thought you were a goner back there, he said as I struggled upright. I saw you go head first into a rock. Did one of you... I stuttered, trying to keep as still as possible so that the pain wouldn't flare up again. It wasn't working. I put my hands to my temples and they both came away red. I did, said Z. I managed to get a hand on you, drag you out. What about Toby? I asked. There was silence for a moment, until Z's shuddering sigh broke it. There was no way he was going to make it, he said finally. He was messed up from that explosion. I'm sorry, Alex. We should have left him up there, I said, the sadness clawing up from my stomach, causing as much agony as the wounds on my skin. My world spun again. Visions of Toby, the younger kid I'd met in Furnace, bruised and broken on the rock, merged with visions of my old friend with the same name, shot in the head by the black suits and resting on his bloody bed. It was too much. The darkness of the tunnel creeping into my vision once again. The sound of the river muted. Alex, stay with us. Fight it. The words brought me back again, each one a life raft that buoyed me up over the shadows. Did we make it? I repeated, staring back down the river. It might have been a product of my feverish mind, but I thought I could see a shaft of light punching down from the roof of the tunnel behind us. It was the hole we'd jumped through, and from it came the unmistakable sound of a siren. Yeah, we made it, Gary hissed. Made it pissing distance. Great plan, little man. Excuse me. Gary turned, and from the light on his helmet I could make out that we were in a narrow stretch of tunnel, the foaming ribbon of water tearing by like it was trying to suck us back in. It curled off to the left, away from the strip of red rock we were on, not quite large enough for a bank, but low enough to scramble onto. We're still too close, Z said. "What do we do now?" said Gary, limping across the narrow ledge until he was towering over me. "You better tell me, or I swear I'm going to bust your skull open." "Why do I have to?" I attempted, but Gary spat his answer at me before I could finish. "You dragged us down here. You get us out." "But there's no way they'll come after us," I said, trying not to scream as I shifted my leg, needles in every nerve. "It's suicide. Not even the black suits would make that jump." I knew, as soon as I'd said it, that I should have kept my mouth closed. I mean, if I'd learnt anything in Furnace, it was not to tempt fate, because fate wants nothing more to do with people like me except to see us suffer. Something tumbled from the hole in the ceiling, a writhing form that spun through the flickering light and struck the raging torrent with a splash that was far too big for a man. "Oh, Jesus. Oh, no, they're not sending the guards," said Z, his voice breaking. Another form dropped like a dead weight, this one howling as it hit the water. "They're sending the dogs." Come on, one more. Hunted. I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't let me. Fortunately, Gary was more than happy to lend a helping hand. Two, actually. He ran forward and grabbed the collar of my tattered prison overalls, hoisting me to my feet and shaking me hard enough to make my teeth chatter. He pulled me close, glaring at me with the soulless eyes of a spider. "Where now?" he screamed, flecks of blood and spittle hitting my face. "You better have a plan or I'm going to feed you to them myself." A plan? I could think of one. Lie down and die. It's all my legs wanted to do, just fold beneath me and leave me there for the dogs. It would be quick, I thought. Those immense canine jaws, the skinless muscles bulging, and those teeth. One bite, maybe two, and it would all be over. I must have still been delirious, because the thought of being free of this bruised flesh almost made me giggle. "Why didn't you think of one?" I spat. "I got us this far. It's your turn." Gary looked at me like he was going to rip off my head. Then, with a grunt of disgust, he shoved me backwards. I stumbled, but Z caught me before I could fall. A wet howl bubbled from the water. Too close. "Come on, Alex," whispered Z in my ear. "We've got to think of something. I don't want to die down here. Not like this." His words cleared the madness from my mind, snapping me to attention. Gary's helmet lamp was veering wildly from left to right as he searched for a way out, but there were no exits, no passageways. The only thing I could see in every direction was rock. Every direction but one. "We have to go back in," I shouted over the roar of the river. "No way, man," Gary replied, his voice shaky. "Almost died the last time. No way I get back in there." "We don't have a choice," I went on, stumbling over the uneven ledge to the raging water. It pummeled the rock beneath my feet, desperate to get hold of us again so that it could finish the job it had started. But there really was no alternative. In seconds, the warden's monstrosities would be on us. "You want to wait here and get torn to pieces? We get back in. It will be easier this time." Gary stomped towards me again, fists raised, but whatever he was planning, he never got the chance. A throbbing snarl rose up to our side, and he swung around, the lamp picking out two silver eyes and countless needled teeth emerging from the foam. The dog was straining to free itself from the current, its claws firing off sparks as they ripped across the rock. It howled, lurching its body onto solid ground, its back legs scrabbling for purchase. "Go!" I yelled, taking a deep breath and throwing myself back into the flood. This time I knew what to expect, bracing myself for the cold and managing to keep the air in my lungs. I felt the river grip me and pull me forwards, but I spread my arms and curled up my legs, keeping one hand against the wall to my left to steady my passage. Behind me, I heard two more splashes. Somebody screamed, a choked cry drowned out by the rush of water in my ears. I turned, my shoulder grazing against the cheese grater rock. What little light there was from Gary's helmet lamp was half submerged, the glow like some deep-sea jellyfish. He was still beneath it, writhing in the water and trying to break back up to the surface. Z had disappeared. I couldn't see the dogs either, but that didn't mean they weren't there in the darkness of the tunnel. I fought the panic, trying to swim against the current towards Gary. I couldn't have cared less if he drowned, but we needed that light. I reached beneath the surface, grabbing a handful of cloth and skin and pulling as hard as I could. He bobbed up, gasping for breath and clinging to me with iron fists. "Keep your head forward," I shouted, coughing as the river dipped and filled my lungs with water. "Look for a ledge, a slope, anything." I don't know if he heard me or not, his panicked breathing and muttered curses not even stopping when he slammed into a rock. He spun around, the lamp illuminating the way we'd come for the briefest of seconds, but leaving an image in my mind that lasted a lot longer. Z's panicked face, and behind him, 4 glinting devil's eyes, gaining fast. Too fast. I swerved to avoid another jagged black blade looming from the water. Then I clutched Gary's overalls as the river dropped again. The water closed in over my head as we plunged down a near vertical shaft, but it wasn't a long drop and I managed to snatch another breath as it levelled out again. It was just as well, as dead ahead the ceiling of the tunnel dropped right to the surface, the river disappearing through a hole in the floor. Oh, great! Death by mauling behind us, death by drowning ahead. And that was all I had time to think before I was sucked down into the whirling abyss. It felt like I was in a washing machine. My body spun so fast that I thought my limbs were going to fly off and my eyeballs pop out as it forced us deeper and deeper into the earth. We burst out in another stretch of tunnel, the water still flowing fast but the river wider now, less furious. I saw Gary and clutched him, feeling his arms around me as though we'd been best friends for years. There was a choked shout as Z flew free, then a set of whimpered barks as the dogs drew breath. "There!" I said, taking hold of Gary's head and twisting it so that his helmet lamp was pointing at a section of broken wall to our left. A series of shadowed grooves led up to a narrow ledge high above the water, steep, but we could climb them. "Get up there," I said breathlessly, "at least until the dogs have gone." We let go of each other and swam for it, my limbs feeling as if they'd been hollowed out and filled with lead, my head chiming like I was standing right next to a church bell. The river almost dragged us past, but I managed to grab an exposed hook of rock and pull myself free of its icy grip. Gary was already ahead, scaling the wall with a speed born from terror. There was a cry from behind me, and I saw Z struggling against the current. I tightened my grip on the rock and reached out for him, taking hold of his hand as he blasted past. The flow was almost too powerful, threatening to suck us both back in, but with a scream of defiance, I reeled him close. Excuse me. It was just as well. Almost as soon as he'd lifted himself up out of the water, a muzzle broke free, splintered teeth snapping shut inches from his heel. The dog threw itself at us, its raw flesh reflecting the dying light from Gary's lamp. But there was no bank, no shore for it to gain purchase. It clung onto the rock for what seemed like forever, its jaws thrashing wildly. Then the other dog sped past, snared fast in the current and whining. It smacked straight into the first, knocking it from the rock and sending them both careening into the darkness. "Gary, wait up," wheezed Z as we listened to the whimpered snarling fade. "We can't see a thing down here." God only knows how I had the strength to climb. Yet somehow I did, dredging something up from deep inside me, some primal strength. Each time I reached for the next handhold or foothold, I felt like I was back in the prison gym, fighting the skulls, kicks and blows raining down on me. But that's the funny thing about pain. The more familiar it becomes, the easier it is to tune it out. I noticed that the light up ahead was no longer moving. Gary had reached the ledge, and although he didn't offer either of us a hand as we pulled ourselves over the lip of rock, he did move his leg out of the way so we could clamber up. From Gary, that was the equivalent of him saying he loved us. Z collapsed, and I sat next to him, peering back down at the river. It was lost in shadow, its undying roar the only thing letting me know it was still there. Where are we going to go now?" spat Gary eventually. "We've lost the dogs, but where's the way out, little man? You messed this up big." I ignored him, trying to get a sense of our surroundings. The ledge we were on was narrow, but stretched out along the length of the cavern. Bathed in weak light, the rough walls were made up of pockets of darkness that looked like those in the chipping halls. Most were probably nothing more than grooves in the rock, but there had to be a passageway or something up ahead. Had to be, my mind echoed. There didn't have to be anything. This wasn't part of the prison. It hadn't been designed by an architect and carved out of the rock by logical minds. It was a river more than a mile beneath the surface, sculpted by the cruel and chaotic forces of nature. Nobody had ever set foot down here before. We were the first. It wasn't going to let us go. No way out, Gary mumbled to himself, rocking back and forth and making shadows sweep across the cavern. Got us killed bad. No, we'll find a way, said Z, sitting up and putting a hand on my shoulder. You got us out of Furnace, right? Nobody's ever done that before. We'll find a way, I know it. I wanted to agree, wanted to get up and charge down the ledge and find that escape route. But I knew in my gut that Gary was right. We're buried alive down here, he said. We're buried alive. And we were. The warden may have locked us up in Furnace, but I was the one who had arranged our execution. Because this wasn't a way out at all. It was a tomb. Buried alive. There we go. I'm not going to save that one for tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining me for the next book in the series. Off on another adventure. What's going to happen to Alex beneath the ground, even deeper than Furnace? I can't wait to share it with you. I hope you're all well. Yeah, like I said, we've just been told we've got another 3 weeks of lockdown. So I can't see this stopping anytime soon. I hope you'll continue to join me here every day about kind of 12 o'clock British lunchtime. Probably early morning for you folks in America. Probably early evening for you folks in Australia. And a whole range of other times for everyone else. But yeah, let me know where you're listening from as well. It'd be interesting to hear whereabouts you're listening from. I'm here in Norwich in the United Kingdom. Yeah, let me know in the comments whereabouts you are. Okay, have a really lovely day, and I will be back tomorrow for more soul-crushing death and horror. Can't wait. Bye.